Good morning. If everyone can take their seats, please. On behalf of the Board of Directors for the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, welcome to our 2023 Legislative Breakfast Series. I'm Kathleen Russell, and I serve as the CEO of the Chamber. A warm thank you to the members of our Legislative Planning Committee, Thom Serafin, Steve Palmer, Garson Hansen, and Adam Maycock. Thank you for sharing your time and talents to make today's program a success. I'd also like to thank FNBC Bank and Trust, UPS, and Plymouth Place for their support of today's breakfast. Thank you to U Chicago Medicine Advent Health, McCook Athletic Expo, Republic Bank, Proxit Inc., Crown Castle, and UPS for their commitment as regional partners of the Chamber. I also want to thank Nancy Cummings of LaGrange Business Association, Sherry Sauer of the LaGrange Park Chamber of Commerce, Kristen Hatinga of the Western Springs Business Association, and the Westchester Chamber in helping to promote today's event. I would also like to thank the elected officials from our municipal partners who are here today. Ernest Millsap, Village President of Hodgkins, Charlie Eck, Trustee, Village of Indian Head Park, Mark Kukler, Village President of LaGrange, Dr. Jim DeCipio, Village President of LaGrange Park, Mark Sheehan, Trustee, Village of LaGrange Park, Jamie, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, Zara, Trustee, Village of LaGrange Park, and Bob Lautner, Trustee, Village of LaGrange Park. Terry Carr, Mayor, Village of McCook, Kevin Russell, Trustee, Village of McCook. Joseph Mangoni, President, Village of North Riverside, Alice Gallagher, President, Village of Western Springs, Melissa Nedemeyer, President, Village of Willow Springs, Michael Kennedy, Trustee, Village of Willow Springs, Terrence Carr, Trustee, Village of Willow Springs. Thank you all for being here today. I think this is a record, so thank you very much. I would like to now introduce Jay Beery, who is not only runs Plymouth Place, but is also a member of our board of directors. He will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and has a few comments. Thank you, Jay.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Yes, that's great. Good to have you here at Plymouth Place. It's an honor to work with the West Suburban Chamber as a board member and work with them on a number of things, and certainly to have all of you here at Plymouth Place. So again, hearty welcome. So I just have a few slides before we do the Pledge of Allegiance. So this is a great time to get up and get that second cup of coffee. And by the way, we do believe in seconds. There's plenty of food back there, so feel free. If you look over to my right, you see what's going on with regards to our significant expansion. And I'm going to show you just a few slides. So yes, it is a little bit of a promo, so you know what's happening here in LaGrange Park. So this is what it will look like. It's called the Arboretum Villas. And just to the east, we have the Center for Healthy Living. And if you kind of see what's happening, and especially in your communities, the word senior is dissipating. And so it's all about older adults, and it's about wellness experiences and culinary experiences, and they'll be delivered here in the Center for Healthy Living. And these are the villas. They're not apartments, they're villas, very high-end condominiums. And if you look at some of the topography, we have all these different destinations, whether it's the pond will support aquatic life, and the Central Parkway, and outdoor dining, espresso dining, pickleball, and also bocce ball and so forth. Matter of fact, we have some residents, yes, they're over the age of 70, who do boat racing. Isn't that amazing? So it's kind of a new day in senior living. This, by the way, is the top of the one-story parking lot. And it's all green roof, and that's what that will look like. It's a beautiful rendering of a place where people can visit, have parties, gatherings, and so forth. And of course, this is the view from the north looking south, and this view is of the pond. So we're excited about it, and we just wanted to make sure you know about it. We're 85% sold out. And most importantly, you know, it takes a village to pull something like this off. We started before COVID 2020, and we had to put it on pause. But I really want to thank our team here, but especially the Village of LaGrange Park. And so Mayor DeCipio, Julia Cedillo, I think you're here, Julia, I saw you. There you are. And Maggie Jar, who was a great coach, and all the trustees who were so helpful to make this happen. So working together is really a wonderful thing. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you. Why don't we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And again, feel free to get that second cup of coffee. I believe we need to introduce, and you can just raise your hand, some additional members of the Board of Directors for the West Suburban Chamber. Amy Grace, Senior Vice President of Relationships, Development, and Bank Council, FNBC Bank. Amy, if you're out there. Brian Kelly, Manager of Home Depot. There's Brian. And Adam Maycock, who's the President CEO of University of Chicago and Advent Health in LaGrange. And I thought I saw Adam come in earlier. So, again, thanks to all of you, all the officials from the various villages and communities that have come in. And it's my pleasure to announce two people who are going to moderate the discussion. And as our panel goes up, we're going to have you go this way or this way to go up to the front. First, no stranger to certainly Plymouth Place is Steve Palmer. Steve, he's right here. And Steve is a lifelong resident of Village of LaGrange, strong believer in community service. He was appointed to the Metro Board of Directors in 2016 and serves on the Lyons Township Mental Health Commission and the Board of Directors of the Illinois Restaurant Association, and is past president of the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce. Steve is the owner and operator of Palmer Restaurant and recently opened the Stadium Club at the Max in McCook. Let's give Steve a round of applause. Steve. Steve, I've been at Palmer's often. It's a favorite place of our residents, and we need to go to the Max there. We'll see you down there. So, next person is Thom Serafin, and Thom is right here. Thom opened his public affairs communications firm in 1987, and since then, he has created a unique space in the world of public affairs in Chicago and across Illinois. Thom is actually no stranger. Everybody knows Thom. Thom's counsel in strategic planning and crisis management and skills are widely sought out by a number of Fortune businesses and government agencies and nonprofits. You've seen him on TV quite a bit. In 2015, Crain's Chicago Business named him one of the 20 most powerful political insiders in Illinois. Tommy didn't know that. That's pretty good. So, Thom has given his time and talents to many nonprofits, including University of Illinois Alumni Board, Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, the Better Government Association, the LaGrange Little League, and the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce, and especially here at Plymouth Place. He was on the board of directors and recently retired, and a significant contributor here to Plymouth Place. Thom, thank you so much. Let's give Thom a round of applause. So, Thom, I'll let you lead the way. And again, thank you so much for being here and joining us today. Thank you.
Good morning. A couple things, just really quick. If you see these notes on your table there, that's for you to write questions on. We have a fantastic panel, but it only is as fantastic as you want it to be by asking questions. So please participate by doing that. Hold them up. Someone will come by and pick them up from you. Before we do all that, it's not often we have a room full quite like this when we have our chamber meetings. And I'm pretty excited about it, but one thing I want to recognize is we have extreme amount of first responders in our room today. We have police and fire department, and I would ask all of you from the police and fire department world, please stand up. Come on. Most of them are chiefs, and they don't like to take a bow. Thank you all for what you do for our communities. This is why we're able to be in business and be doing things around here. We appreciate you very much. With that being said, I would like to introduce my partner, Mr. Thom Serafin.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. So as I introduce everybody, I would ask the panelists just to come through this door and get up on the seat, and we can get started. Alexa is from Northwestern, way the other side of town, and she has yet to arrive. So when she does, let's all give her a good round of applause and make her feel at home. Our first distinguished panelist this morning is Representative LaShawn Ford, and he flew in yesterday from where? Africa. So he wanted to make sure he was here, so he cut the date a couple of days short. So we're grateful that you are here. LaShawn's been around and elected first in 2007, and he brings a unique philosophy to the office of state legislator. He taught social studies and coached basketball in Chicago Public Schools at Bridge Elementary on the Northwest Side. Worked as a precinct captain at the Austin neighborhood where he grew up. He's a licensed real estate broker and also a licensed insurance agent. LaShawn has been reelected 6 times, and it's really an interesting district that you have. You have the tough areas of the west side where there's a large amount of poverty, and then you go to Oak Park, Berwyn, North Riverside, Forest Park, Proviso Township, Brookfield, LaGrange Park, LaGrange, and Western Springs. And he's also one of the chief architects, along with Cam Buckner and other legislators in Springfield, on the Safety Act, which is one of the subject for discussion this morning. So I would ask the representative to come on up. Next, we have Chief of the Willow Springs Police Department, Garry McCarthy. And I've known Garry for a long time. And, you know, he comes to the table with so much unique experience as well. Police director in New Jersey, one of the police bosses in New York City, ran the 9/11 response at Ground Zero. He's been the superintendent of Chicago Police Department. He's a criminologist. He's got plenty of college degrees behind him, and he's really studying the issue of what is and what isn't good police practice. So we're very honored to have him here this morning along with Representative Ford. Come on up, Garry. And the chairman of the Illinois Restaurant Association, which is the largest private sector employer in the state, $30 billion, $30 billion, 600,000 employees, the restaurant of the year in 2015. This young man came over from Mexico. In fact, the village was Sabinas Hidalgo, you know, in Mexico in 1985, 84. And he decided that he was going to go to work and put together a restaurant organization. And he came up with the Third Coast Hospitality Group. And one of my favorite places when I was single and lived in the Chicago's North Side was to go to John Barleycorn. And many of you have been there. That's his place, Bo's Cantina. I mean, he's got a bunch of restaurants. We're honored to have him here this morning. He spent an hour and a half on the road to get here. Sam Sanchez. I'm going to first ask Representative LaFord and the other 2 panelists to give us a couple of minutes on their perspective on what we see in Illinois today on crime and some of the solutions that the legislature has come up with, like the Safety Act. So we're going to first turn it over to Representative LaShawn Ford, and he'll give us his 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you very much, Thom. And I definitely want to thank Catherine for her hard work at making sure that this event took place or helping get me here. If you don't mind, I know it's 2 minutes, but there is someone here that's had a career that I know was a good friend to this community and the people in this room, dedicated a lot of his time, and was a true and is a true Republican. And that's Leader Durkin. I don't know if you had a retirement party out here, but I would ask that we all join in giving him a big round of applause for his dedication. You know, as a Democrat, he clearly held a line for Republicans, but he also understood when compromise was necessary for the good of state. So it was great serving with you. Thank you so very much for being who you are. I'm LaShawn Ford from the other side of where Durkin lived, on the west side of Chicago. Two different perspectives, but yet we were able to work together and get things done. My office is at 5051 West Chicago Avenue, and it's open for service anytime to all of you. We have a full staff that's ready to serve you. As your state representative, and I'll give the number out right now, 217-782-5962. That's the Springfield number. And the Chicago number is 773-750-0866. And we're happy to serve you and your needs for the state. Well, Thom, I got to tell you, you're a businessman, and the people up here understand business. And next to a doctor, the people in this room are very important for the state of Illinois to continue to be successful. That's the business community and law enforcement, and of course, our other first responders. Next to our health, if we have good health, what do we want? We want to feel safe. And if we all feel safe, then we can live our best life. So thank you, first responders, for being who you are. And my goal in life is to make sure that we get it right so that we all can arrive where we want to be, and that is to enjoy life and be safe. We come from different perspectives because of the life that we live, and each one of us have a perspective that must be respected and must be worked on together. And that's why I respect Durkin, and that's why I respect the next speaker, because we have different perspectives, but we remain respectable to one another. And when the time comes, we actually get stuff done. You know, Garry here, we ran for mayor together, and we clearly didn't see eye to eye all the time. And my 2 minutes is up. Don't hold back. I'm not afraid of tough questions. I'll answer your questions directly, or I'll evade them.
Our fourth panelist arrived all the way from near Wisconsin, I think. Alexa. Yeah. Alexa Van Brunt. She's the director of the Illinois office of the MacArthur Justice Center, a national civil rights nonprofit, as well as the director of the Civil Rights Litigation Clinic at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. Welcome, and thank you for being here. You've come a long way. All right, Garry.
Man, I got to tell you, LaShawn has gotten so much better in the last 4 years. I just wanted to add one or two things that are really important to me. I'm from a place called the Bronx, New York. I apologize for maybe speaking like I'm still from the Bronx, New York. I can't help it. I do like the Yankees. Can't help it. But I got to tell you, I've been so fortunate to learn from so many people over the course of my career. I started with the NYPD in 1981. Got very fortunate, hit the test just right. I ended up running New York's crime strategy for 7 years, where I got exposed to criminology on a level that most police officers don't get exposed to. I can't believe they let me on campus at both Harvard and Yale. I learned a lot up there, a lot of really smart people in this field. And I think past just putting cops on the dots. And I think that that's something that's kind of missing in today's world, along with a number of other things. So I was also the vice president of the Major City Chiefs Association. I'm a lifetime member, IACP, and so on. And I haven't been to a police conference in 5 years. Went to Dallas to IACP, Major City Chiefs, back in October. And I walked away with the perspective almost like an aha moment, because if you came to one of our conferences 6 years ago, you would have heard us talking about how to reduce crime at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the cocktails after dinner. 75 to 80% of our conversation was around that. At this conference, I couldn't believe that 75 to 80% of the conversation was about equity, social justice, inclusion, and so on and so forth. I didn't hear anybody discuss reducing crime. And it kind of struck me that in the interest of building trust, right, because that's what everybody wants to do, policing has pretty much abandoned, for lack of a better word, our core mission, which is to provide for the public safety. And the problem is our legitimacy comes from doing our jobs, right? You can't build trust unless you have legitimacy. So we're in a conundrum right now, and I got to do this because I think LaShawn knows that some of the aldermen in Chicago can be a little bit difficult. And I'm going to quote Jason Irvin, who is the chairman of the Black Caucus in Chicago, at David's budget hearing, which, by the way, for the superintendent, they last 2 days. Everybody gets like 2 hours at you. It's a marathon, and it's not that much fun. But the job was fun, but not that part. Alderman Irvin said to David Brown, the police superintendent, he said, "I'm not asking you to be a social worker. I'm not asking you to be a mental health counselor. I'm not asking you to be a basketball coach. I'm asking you to be the police. That is what our residents are asking for." This is something that I don't think a lot of people realize. You can't build trust without legitimacy. Our legitimacy comes from doing our damn job. That's stopping people from dying. I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Sanchez is going to be our next speaker.
Hello, thank you. Good morning.
And before you speak, I just want to make sure everybody knows you've been actively involved with the Chicago Alternative Policing Strategy. That's something I think other people are going to be speaking to. So I just wanted to put that.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation. Moments like this inspires me to see everybody who shows up to these meetings. Been in business for 34 years. I was born in the United States. My parents took me to Mexico. I was a DACA kid in Mexico. We had to stay every Monday of the month, the first Monday, home because American citizens were not allowed to go to public schools. So that's our history. So we struggled on our way back. Okay. After 34 years in business, 2 years ago, a young lady went to work at Chase Bank on the corner of Dearborn and Ontario. She was murdered by an 11-time felon, who's known as mentally ill, 11-time felon. I went to that corner and I broke down and I cried. Couldn't take it anymore. Turned my business over to my daughters, and I dedicated myself almost 100% of my time advocating for better policies and to the judicial system. Judicial system that has failed all of us in Cook County. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's also a lot of bad stuff. I think working together and hearing out people, as you see on the panelists, and people as yourself, could come out with better ideas than what we've seen put through legislation. LaShawn is my friend. Ken Buckner is my friend. We talked. They know my policy. They know what I want changed. We did talk about the policies. I believe that better times are to come. We have enacted some strategies in the city of Chicago that I know, because around my business, have worked. And I would like to, and I would talk about those strategies. We reduced the shootings in River North by towing 6,500 cars just on the entertainment districts. I want to bring that to everybody's attention because those cars are part of where they stash their drugs, guns, and liquor. So please ask any question. I'm chairman of every restaurant in the state of Illinois. We lobbied, the association lobby. We struggled through the riots, through the pandemic, and we're struggling through labor and cost of goods. I'm here to answer any questions and to help out.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alexa von Brunt. And Alexa has been a pioneer in this work at a relatively young age. The Robinson versus Martin case kind of prompted a lot of the reforms in Cook County. Why don't you go ahead and give us your 2 minutes, and then we'll go into a discussion.
Sure. I'm very happy to serve as the lawyer on this panel. And as the lawyer, I'm not going to be remotely as inspiring as the other three here. And I will probably stick with the technical base that I know, which is the Safety Act, which is the elimination of cash bond, because that is a large part of, I think, why we're here today. But also, when we talk about public safety, I think we have to recognize that there has been a massive reform in the past year that puts Illinois, in my view, at the forefront of promoting public safety and promoting social justice, because the two are intertwined on this issue. In 2021, the legislature passed the Safety Act, and part of that were the pretrial fairness provisions, which eliminated cash bond, yes, but also set strict standards for when people could be held pretrial. That has not been how the pretrial system has worked in this state for over 100 years. Over 250,000 people cycle through Illinois' jails every year. They have not been convicted of anything. They have not been found by a judge to constitute a safety threat based on any evidence. They have not been shown to be a flight risk by any evidence. They're there because they cannot afford the cash bond that got set on them right after arrest. As a result, the people in our jails throughout the state of Illinois are not what seem to be often described as hardened criminals or really safety risks, but people who do not have very much money, people whose families cannot raise the cash bond, and they're primarily people who are Black, brown, and in areas of the city that do not have as many resources, if it's from Chicago, and from rural areas which don't have as many resources as well. So over the years, I've been to many, many areas of the state looking at pretrial detention hearings and pretrial bail hearings and talking to public defenders' offices and state's attorneys' offices. And what has become clear is that the way people are detained right now does not have to do with public safety. And if we are going to talk about public safety, we should talk about standards to make sure that is reached. What the Pretrial Fairness Act provisions ensure is that if you are a real and present safety risk, based on the case that you are charged with, you can be detained. A prosecutor can bring a petition and a judge can detain you pretrial. If you're also shown to be a flight risk, meaning you're going to evade the court process, you can also be detained. That is clear. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you can be detained. Currently, you cannot be. If you pay a lot of money, you get out regardless of your safety risk. All this is to say is that standards and clear due process rights go hand in hand with public safety. And other places in the country that have eliminated cash bail and set these standards have shown decreases in crime. They have shown increases in resources for communities, and they have, in fact, promoted public safety and social justice at the same time. And I know Illinois can do the same. So thank you for having me.
When you remind the panelists, when you speak into the microphone, get up tight so everybody else can hear you on the audience. That's a good introduction from everybody. The Safety Act obviously is the elephant in the room, but the question I'd like to ask first is crime. Some people are saying crime is down. Some people are saying crime is up. When Garry McCarthy was Chicago police superintendent, he reduced the police shootings by 70% and police complaints by 50%. LaShawn Ford and his colleagues are in Springfield legislating, and Sam Sanchez is on the front line with the restaurant owners around town, worried about being held up and prosecution. Can you just give us your minute on prosecution where you're concerned and your restaurant owners are concerned?
I mean, pretty simple. Yesterday, January 24th is the 1 year of Melissa Ortega, 8-year-old little girl crossing the street on 26th and Pulaski. 16-year-old gang member shot her in the head and killed her. Yesterday became a year. 16-year-old who was arrested for armed carjacking once was released. Second time armed carjacking was released. Third time it was arrested on an armed carjacking and released again. We're talking about repeat violent offenders. That same day, he took the life of an 8-year-old little Melissa. I understand that your financial status should not determine your freedom, but the actions should. And clearly, the county failed not only Melissa and her family, but failed a 16-year-old kid from rescuing him after the first time he committed a violent crime. He should have been taken away from his family that are known to be gang members, the mother, the father, and the brothers. So the judicial system has failed, has not, have not saved the people that are in trouble. They didn't save Melissa, and they didn't save the 16-year-old kid who's going to be the rest of his life in jail. And we see this over and over again. We hear that 80% of the people that are released on electronic monitors or home confinement, they're good people. Most likely they are. There's no dispute about it. But what about the 20%? That's 1,000 people that don't behave themselves. You put 5 criminals, armed criminals with a bad history, and an entertainment district where we have restaurants, the whole city goes up for grabs. We've seen it happen last summer, the summer before. This cannot be tolerated. We're asking, and we ask our legislators that on the Safety Act to be amended. They amended it, but not far enough. 90 days. When 90 days to be able to try somebody is impossible when Cook County just lost 235 prosecutors. How are we going to hold people responsible in 90 days? We're asking again, I mean, I asked the legislators, again, has to be amended again. Violent repeat offenders, not first time, not because they're poor or they're rich, it's because of the action, the crime. If you pull a gun on someone and do a carjacking, murder, attempted murder, shooting someone, should never call it a mutual combatant. A block away from my restaurant, a guy got shot 5 times. The guy punched him in the face. I have the video on the camera. I sent the video to the police. They sent it to the prosecutor. The guy pulled a gun and shot him 5 times. That was a mutual combatant. That's what we get in Cook County. That's what we have to stop.
Thank you. We're going to go to Representative LaFleur now. The representative grew up in Cabrini Green. You know, his mother was a teenager. He was adopted by his grandmother. Very violent Cabrini Green. He made his way through life and went to Loyola University, got his bachelor's of science in political science, and played basketball there. So you have a unique vision into what's going on here, what Sam talks about, but you see it from a different side, and you were one of the catalysts in Springfield to make this law, the Safety Act, actual law. What was your motivation?
Well, I would say, for one, Illinois, we know, is a perfect state. There's no doubt. Illinois is beautiful. But our laws are not perfect. And so we're not going to, we want everyone to know you should come to Illinois. It's the most beautiful place, but we need to make sure that we adjust the laws. And what we saw is that the laws in Illinois needed to be changed. You heard Sam say it. Sam said that what was on the books were not working. It's true. Violent people actually continue to cause problems in our state. So what should we do? Should we ignore it? No, we have to work on that law and make it better. So what the Safety Act is the Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Act. That's what the Safety Act is, commonly known as the Safety Act. I used to say, even when we were negotiating, I used to say Safety Act. It's the Safety Act, right? And it's Illinois statute that was enacted in 2021 that makes a number of reforms to the criminal justice system. There is no doubt people in this room know that our criminal justice system is not fair. So I'll pause there for just a second for us to recognize that our criminal justice system isn't fair. And if you want to go visit a county jail, a prison, you'll see that something is wrong. For the Christmas holiday, I went to Cook County Jail, and 95% of the people locked up in Cook County Jail were there because they have a substance use disorder. That's bad for taxpayers. It's bad for Illinois. It's bad for our community. So we have to do something about that. It's unfortunate that the law enforcement has to get a bad rap because of what Springfield has done to laws in the past. Please work with us to make sure that we continue to build on the Safety Act to get it more perfect, because there's still work to be done. But I will tell you today that the Safety Act has actually made Illinois a better place, and the future of Illinois will be better as we continue to work on the Safety Act in the legislature. But I meet with my law enforcement agents throughout the district, and I listen. Please don't be afraid to call and get on me and tell me what you want to see, what's not working. And I promise you, I'll stand up for you as long as you're fair.
Thank you, Representative. We're going to go to the police chief now, McCarthy. You've heard the legislative side. You've heard what the university is trying to do. You've heard from Sam, who's on the street with the storefronts. And we haven't heard from the police department. You've been through the NATO summit. You've been through all these very difficult situations as police chief. What are we not doing right as a police department, in the city of Chicago and in the suburbs? How is it policy? What are we not doing right?
Simply put, politics is dictating policy. Simply put, politics is dictating policy. When you have a plumber come to your house, you don't ask him to work on your electricity, right? Nobody tells a doctor how to operate, but everybody wants to tell the police how to police. Mark Twain said, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So being in this world, I've worked with a lot of statistics, and I know that they can be manipulated. At the end of the day, here's a couple of statistics you need to know. 85% of the victims of crime in the city of Chicago are, anybody want to take a guess? African American. The Constitution was rightfully written based on the rights of the individuals who are accused. What about the victims' rights? You know what I think social justice is? I think social justice should be that convicted criminals should compensate their victims. How's that for a concept? But at the end of the day, look, everybody wants to talk about really nice words like, okay, mass incarceration, bad, right? Absolutely. And just something that people may not realize, I absolutely agree that mass incarceration is based upon two failed endeavors. One is our failed war on crimes and this war on narcotics in this country. And the second thing is that indigent people can't get out for low-level crimes. Violent criminals need to be incarcerated. It's that simple. And that's not what we're getting right. People say mass incarceration, and unfortunately, like LaShawn said, you go to a prison and you're going to see a lot of black people in jail. What about the victims? What's going on there? And what are we doing about that? Everybody wants to see police reform. I'm going to read something to you that is pretty important. It's something called legal cynicism. And I don't have to read it because I've done it so many times. Legal cynicism is a social norm in a disenfranchised community that has it that the system is uncaring, unequipped, and unable to provide for the personal safety of the individuals who live there. The system. So we're talking about judges, we're talking about prosecutors, we're talking about defense attorneys, we're talking about elected officials. And who gets the blame? Police reform. We got to reform the police. Look, we don't do everything right, but we also don't do everything wrong. And at the end of the day, if an officer violates policy, they need to be disciplined. If they violate the law, they need to go to jail. I've put handcuffs on police officers, and I'm proud to say it. Because if you put a gun in somebody's stomach and say, give me the money, that's called a robbery. And I don't care if the victim is a drug dealer. As a matter of fact, that's another thing that we got wrong. I don't think that narcotics is actually a crime. Narcotics is a social problem. And it's something that needs to be handled because I'm the father.
Thank you, Garry. Thank you. There's the conversations in the business world about crime is getting very serious. Starbucks and McDonald's in the last few weeks talked about closing their stores in the bad neighborhoods where there's a crime element over and over again. J.P. Morgan on their ATMs, they want to shut them off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So, it's starting to impact business. I'd like to go back to Mr. Sanchez and ask him, in the restaurant business, how are you coping with the issues of crime yourself? There's a lot of neighborhoods that are hiring their own agencies to protect their places of business. What are you doing?
So the restaurant industry going through a lot of turnaround during the pandemic, and we're coming back alive. And I gotta say it. I mean, the restaurant's probably better. We did better 2022 with 2 months closed than we did 2019. But the cost has increased tremendously, which is the cost of goods, cost of labor. But the one cost that we never expected. I spent last year in 2022 $180,000 on private security. Armed private security who has to work the sidewalk, the whole block. So every restaurant out there is spending a lot of extra more money on private security, helping the police, doing good paperwork, okay, and tracking, doing good paperwork and to go to court. I mean, we go to court with the police, but it doesn't matter. We hold people that have guns. We do pat downs and we get them arrested, and the charges are dropped. So this norm continues, restaurants are gonna close because they're afraid of violence. Some of the restaurants that used to open at 2 o'clock in the morning, the steakhouses, are closing at 10 o'clock at night. Some of us still take the chance. I mean, I have 2 restaurants on the corner of between Wells and LaSalle on Kinsey. 13 armed security guys I have to have. One is to be able to prevent people from trying to get in who are not welcome, who are problems on the street. You could tell that they're gang members and they're flashing signs. So that becomes a danger. So not the enabling the criminal to continue having a revolving door and not hold accountable is costing our livelihood and our business. So yeah, I mean that's why we're still fighting. But I'm sorry, just let me touch one more subject here because this is really important. We talked about incarceration, and I don't believe in mass incarceration. I don't because it's going to come and haunt us later, as it's done right now. We know this. This is happening right now. Last year, traveled to Mexico City. Was invited by the mayor of a municipality called Iztapalapa. Iztapalapa has the worst crime status of the whole entire Mexico City. We're talking about 35 million people population with the state. Okay, they reduced crime by 65%, and I wanted to know why. So we went there with a delegation from Chicago. They built 12 culture centers. These culture centers are after-school programs. Culture centers that provide lunch, meals, family program orientation, job training. Okay, and this is what we're missing here. I talk to every legislator, and I want to know why are they not putting money down? Why are they not building cultural centers? Why are they not bringing family program orientations? Why is the opportunity? I can hear the cries every day. We don't have it. We don't have it. The money is there. The money is there. Build the culture center. Save the future generation. Because if you don't, we're going to see them on the street committing crime. That's all they're learning. If you're not teaching them, somebody else is teaching them.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Alexa, and you were shaking your head, nodding when Chief McCarthy was talking about the drugs not being a crime, and then you were nodding, hearing about the culture centers from Mr. Sanchez. Now that you have the Safety Act,
Yeah.
as a law,
Yeah.
what's the next step? Follow up on the situation that
Right.
the gentleman were talking about.
I think it's really interesting how much agreement there is at this table about what's not working and what needs to be done. It is incredibly expensive to incarcerate people pre-trial when we just, sorry, I think I'd learn how to use one of these by now. I have to emphasize that to lock somebody up every single day in the Cook County Jail costs hundreds of dollars. You multiply that by the thousands of people who are there, and it is costing Cook County a tremendous amount of money to lock up people who are not actually shown to be a safety threat. If we want to be able to invest in resources in our communities by creating training centers and creating opportunities for young people, first of all, that's an incredibly laudable goal, and we should be doing that. But one way to do that is to get the resources that we're currently investing in locking people up who have not been shown to be a safety threat and put it back in the community. We are all talking about making sure that people who have committed a violent offense or who have been shown to have likely to been committed a violent offense are not let out on the streets. And that's what the new law does. These are people who have not been convicted of anything, but if a prosecutor thinks that there is evidence to show that this person did commit the crime and that it is a safety threat, they can bring it to the judge and the judge can hold somebody in jail. And that will cut down the costs of holding people pretrial in the jail, and it should be able to loosen the resources to better invest in communities for the very reasons that the other panelists have raised here. So I think the new law is really going to reinforce the goals of public safety and reinvestment in community resources.
Thank you, Alexa. Before we go back to Chief McCarthy, we talk about the four prongs of criminal justice in Cook County. You have the sheriff's office, you have the state's attorney's office, and the judge's office. They all come under the county board, and the county board president handles their budgets. I'm not defending the mayor, but the mayor only has the police department in the city of Chicago. So that's a distinguishing factor in what we're talking about here. Nobody has the one answer. You have to work together. Chief McCarthy.
So I apologize. First of all, I got emotional. I lost a daughter to narcotics. If we want to fix what's happening, it's a two-step process. And the process has to be, simply put, the police can do something in the short term, and all these other things that we're talking about are long-term solutions. Economic development is going to come if people feel safe going downtown in Chicago and eating at Sammy's restaurants, and you'd be doing better if you hired my security firm, Sammy. Should have came to me first. But the fact is, all these things that we talk about, people don't even understand what these things mean. Social justice, equity, inclusion. What does it mean to anybody in this room? If you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. It's like community policing, right? It's like looking at the index and not reading the book and thinking that you're an expert, and suddenly we're making policy based on buzzwords and emotional decisions. There's no practical thought in my mind that's going into the big picture. The police are not going to build trust without legitimacy. And that legitimacy goes from the police right up the ladder, includes the jails, includes the politicians. And if that doesn't occur, don't blame the police.
Thank you. I like that.
Wait, one more statistic.
Yeah.
In 2014 and 2015, Chicago is on the verge of breaking 400 murders going down. Last year, 100% increase, over 800 murders in Chicago. So you want to talk
over what period of time?
Over the year. In other words, in 2021, 800 murders. 2022, there was something like 600 murders or 700 murders, which is still 300 or 400. That's over what was happening before. And that's how we cut statistics. Because they can claim in Chicago right now the crime is down. Well, it's down compared to last year when you had a record debacle year. Look at the course of what's happened over the last 4 years.
Thank you. Representative Ford is going to respond to that, but I want to remind everybody to write their questions down. Mr. Palmer and the staff are going to be collecting them, and we have also some questions from the audience that Mr. Palmer will be getting to. So, Representative Ford.
Yeah, thanks. I want to respond to the trust issue. You know, the 1994 crime bill was something that even black people wanted passed. Black people, think I can speak for black people? All right. They really want police because Sam talks about restaurants closing in communities that's predominantly white. Black people in their communities can't get restaurants, can't get fresh fruits and vegetables and fresh meat and quality grocery stores because of crime. There is no doubt that black homeowners need safe communities and they value law enforcement because a house value is based on the safety of the community. So let me tell you, there's no doubt that black people want policing and they want good policing in their community. So they just want to have the trust. And so if we can build that trust, as the chief said, we're on the right path because we all want the same thing.
Thank you, Representative Ford. Steve's got a question from the audience.
If you have some cards, raise your hand up real quick. We'll come by and get them. There's a couple. Then we need about 3 dozen more, so start writing down your thoughts and questions. Don't be afraid. We are very fortunate to have this amazing panel today with us, but we're also very fortunate to have someone who I've called a friend, someone who has served our community in many different positions, from being a prosecutor to also the minority leader of the House of Representatives. And I'd like to give Jim Durkin an opportunity to ask a question.
Well, I think it's more of just some thoughts as being a person who was on the ground floor when the Safety Act was passed. I have often said in the past that when you have bills of this magnitude, process is just as important as substance. So let's just go back a little bit. LaShawn, you remember that day. This was a bill that was dropped in the last day of lame duck session 2.5 years ago at 3 o'clock in the morning in the state Senate. No review. Democrats will say that the Republicans were aware of these ideas. It's not true because we never saw any language. Language and the words in the laws matter so much when it comes to criminal procedure and criminal law. Passed out of the Senate, a committee hearing, 3 o'clock in the morning, where the members of the Senate were zombies, came over to the House at 10:30 in the morning at the Bank of Springfield Center. I had a meeting in the Capitol. I rushed back, and as you recall, I wanted to be recognized to ask questions, which I was cut off and not allowed to ask questions after one Republican was asking questions of the sponsor of the bill. So I will just say this. This is a classic situation that Nancy Pelosi a few years ago said that on the health care bill, the Obamacare, that we have to pass the bill so you can find out what is in it. And it's absolutely true. Absolutely 100% true from someone who was right there. So as we went along with this process, there were at least 4 or 5 different opportunities to correct the bill. I just want to mention a few of them because I think we have law enforcement officers who in here need to know there's more in this bill than no cash bail. But let me just say with no cash bail, since Tim Evans about 5 years ago, the chief judge instituted his own, through executive order, his own cash bail light, Cook County Jail has shut down one of their divisions. 50% of the people who are held are released on electronic monitoring, and by my stats, we have 100 people who have been charged with first-degree murder are walking the streets on EM. So this has not been a good experience, and we can go back. There's a chief judge, and also the sheriff has EM privileges. So the governor would say in the last year in the campaign that there's a woman who is charged with stealing diapers who is sitting in a jail because she can't make bond. I'm still trying to find out who that person is and where that happened. Because right now, people are charged with class 4, class 3 felonies are not sitting. They just aren't. If they are, they're sitting. It's because they violated their bail bond on a previous case. But I know this for a fact as a person who served as a prosecutor at 26 California during the war on drugs in the 90s. That was the case. It's just not the case right now. I'm going to move forward. Question? All right. Well, LaShawn Ford, we passed a bill that says that you are now allowed for 3 phone calls for a person who has been charged to make to their attorney or their family member, correct? That was part of the Safety Act.
Right.
All right. I'm just going to tell you because I said we have law enforcement officers here, and I had this debate with the sponsor of the bill. The way the bill reads is that when you're in police custody, you have a right to make 3 phone calls to family members or your attorney. Police custody, and Ms. Van Brunt, you'll understand, in custody means that you're not free to leave.
I actually have a lawsuit against the Cook County or against the Chicago Police Department about the denial of access to lawyers and phones,
Sure.
and it relates to that provision. So
Right.
I'm intimately familiar with that provision.
So do you believe that this law allows for 3 phone calls with no exceptions?
It allows for 3 phone calls, including a call to lawyers, alone and in private, after being brought into police custody, because, as we know, the majority of people who are charged with violent crimes in Chicago or under investigation for them are kept for at least 48 hours away from their family, away from attorneys. They are interrogated without lawyers. We have a massive problem, of course, of interrogations in the city of Chicago. And this law makes sure that people cannot be held incommunicado in districts across the city in accordance with Illinois law that already exists that promises that people who are detained get access to families and lawyers. So this law is very important to make sure that people's rights are protected before they go to court, before they are brought to the jail, and while they are possibly facing massively serious charges. So yes, I am familiar
Sure.
with that provision, and it's a really important provision of the law.
If that was actually the way in which the bill was written. But the fact is, we're saying not 3, but you get 9 phone calls, because every time you're in custody, which means you're not free to leave, let's look at it, how it works. When you're arrested on the street, you are placed. You are handcuffed. If you see a police officer who determines that there's probable cause of some type of crime, you are handcuffed. You are put into the squad car. You are not free to leave. 1, that's when your first 3 phone calls under this law kick in. 2, you're brought to the district station for investigation. And that says under the law that if you move into a new place of custody, the 3 phone calls start again. So we're at 6. If the police determine that they're going to charge that person, you are brought over to the county jail, another place of detention, in which you get another 3 phone calls. So I look at 9 phone calls at this bill that was trying to fix, and you remember I had a long debate with the sponsor in the bill. You're never going to get a confession again based on this. Not only is it 9 phone calls, but there's no exemption in there for when the situation is when a family member is the victim of the crime, that meaning where it is the domestic violence situation where the wife is a family member, where the child is a sexual abuse victim, where someone is going to be able to call up that family because they're allowed to make those phone calls to say, don't talk, don't cooperate. Anyway, that's a situation that is in this bill. I'm going to be very brief. There's another situation, and Garry, you talked about, and I think is the reason I'm doing this, because we never got a chance to ask these questions 2 years ago on the floor. And I want to make sure people in Illinois understand that this is more than just no cash bail. There's a provision in here that says that we're going to allow for victims of crime. It's currently in the law that victims can be subpoenaed to testify at a bond hearing. There's more rights in this bill that are given to the defendants in this situation where, think about this. Can you think of a situation where a victim of crime, under any crimes, any scenario, should be subject to a subpoena to appear at a bond hearing? No. It's traumatized. You'll never get that person to testify again. The law was changed in which it was said that the court finds by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant will be materially prejudiced if the complaining witness does not appear. Now, let me just go back. 2014, we passed a constitutional amendment. Steve, I know, this is important. 2014, we passed a constitutional amendment called Marcy's Law that says victims of crime shall not be subject to intimidation, abuse, or duress at any time during the court system. And I put a bill in just about before I left to talk about this. But this is an absolute travesty to say that we are going to give more rights to that defendant at a bond hearing completely in conflict with the Constitution, what it does about protecting victims. Ms. Brunt, I'd like for you to, you're shaking your head the opposite way, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. But the thing is, you're never going to have a victim show up again in court if this is going to be a situation where the court is going to grant that motion to compel a crime victim with no exception again for, it says that we have to take into consideration the sensitivity of the nature. But there's nothing that prohibits that domestic violence victim from being dragged in 48 hours after a case has been charged if this court grants the motion. Hey, I've got about 5 or 6 other things, but this, I'm just going to finish off by this. I'm not against reform, and LaShawn Ford knows that, because I rewrote that whole juvenile deception bill, ban on juvenile deception, 1.5 years ago. I did that, and it was the right thing to do. But I also believe in accountability. This bill is going to, in time, if attorneys who are going to be responsible for enforcing this, who have Sixth Amendment obligations to provide adequate counsel, it's going to be very, very, very difficult upon society in Illinois, crime victims, businesses. And Sam, 90 days to go to trial, good grief. And that's the only way it gets told is by the defendant's own motion. You're going to have guys walking out of Cook County Jail been charged with first-degree murder because they're not going to be able to go to trial. It is given 120 days if you need forensic testing on it, but the fact is you're not going to get that done in the 120 days. I'd be more than happy to give my own thoughts in a separate forum about all of the problems with this bill that are not related to the no cash bail.
I'd like to ask Police Chief to respond to some of those issues that the representative just mentioned. How does that help or hurt a police officer from doing his job?
Well, just the simplest question that you actually asked me, which is if a crime victim receives a subpoena to go to a bond hearing, they're going to be traumatized. It's that simple. And you know, speaking of trauma, I'm sorry, I'm going to divert a little bit. I'm going to go back to cops again. You know, the other 20% of the time that I spent in Dallas at this conference was spent on officer wellness. And I said, man, that's good. We got something going in the right direction here because cops have been traumatized for a long time. You know, my dad was a World War II Marine, did the whole Pacific Theater from start to finish. It wasn't easy growing up McCarthy in the Bronx, I could tell you that. But I had a much better understanding of my dad after I became a police officer and some of the things that I saw and went through. 9/11 being a great experience, quite frankly. No place in the world I would rather have been. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. But there's a case going on right now, and you want to talk about politics dictating policy. Tragic event, the Adam Toledo shooting in Chicago. 13-year-old boy on the street, what's known as a shorty, hanging out with a full-blown gang member, 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday night. I think that's a school night, even in Chicago, right, LaShawn? 2 o'clock in the morning, hanging out with a gangbanger, gets picked up on ShotSpotter, firing shots at somebody, actually expends the entire magazine. It's not a clip, it's a magazine. Expends the entire magazine, the cops respond. What does the gangbanger do? He does the plan. He gives the gun to the shorty. The shorty turns and runs from the police. We've all seen the video. Turns, and in a split second, the officer fires one shot and ends up killing Adam Toledo. First of all, what's the response to that? What's the response by, I'm going to just call it Chicago, a foot pursuit policy. A foot pursuit policy that basically says that you have to get a supervisor's permission to engage in a foot pursuit. And you can't chase somebody unless you have probable cause, which means that they're arrestable. Now, you haven't even touched this person, maybe. You don't know anything about it. What does that mean? It means, in essence, no foot pursuits. We didn't say, how do we keep 13-year-olds off the street at 2 o'clock in the morning on a school night? We didn't say, how do we get the gun out of the 13-year-old's hand that he just got from a full-blown gangbanger? We didn't say, how's this officer? You know how I know that? Because I've spoken to him. I've spoken to him 4 or 5 times. It's something that I always do and always have done as a supervisor when an officer is involved in a traumatic event. So what happens with this officer? First of all, nobody called him except me. I'll just leave it at that. That's shameful. Second, and by the way, he is a mess. You imagine shooting and killing a 13-year-old kid? Second of all, he gets cleared by the state's attorney. He gets cleared by the department as a good shooting. And what happens? It goes to the police board, which is basically, I'm going to call it, a political board. And they decide that they want to do a disciplinary hearing on this officer now. Where's the officer wellness? This guy's been sitting at home ruminating on a shooting 24 hours a day for 2 years. Yeah, we're going to talk about officer wellness these days. This just doesn't make sense, ladies and gentlemen. That is an example of exactly what's wrong on 10 different levels. We're not taking the right medicine for what ails us. We're not even diagnosing the right problems. Right? There's a 12-step program that I'm never going to engage in. It starts with you first have to identify the problem and confront it. We're not doing that in law enforcement.
A little different subject, but one that does talk about things that have happened recently. Riots, protests, nonviolent protests, and other protests.
Mostly peaceful. Looting.
And I guess not just the way the city of Chicago handled it, but how it came out to the suburbs. I was very proud to participate in a nonviolent protest or whatever you want to call it in LaGrange that ended up being really listening to some of these young people and what they were saying. You know, beautiful thing. There was prayers, there was singing, there was walking together and talking. At the same time, we saw other things. We saw businesses boarded up. We saw businesses looted. And this type of mob reaction and mob thing is happening more and more. And the police seem to, it seemed to be, they were told, don't do anything, just, sit on your hands. And then when they're all done, this is, the insurance will pay for it. I don't get that. I don't think we get that as business owners here. The entire panel can have some sort of response to this, but I'd like to start with my friend Sam Sanchez and to his experience.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I mean, we all seen on the news the looting. So I have 6 restaurants in the city of Chicago. 2 of them in River North were on Kinsey Street. That was they were pushing everybody out. That's kind of like where the main stuff was happening. Big restaurants. I mean, they hold about 1,000 people each restaurant. So the amount of damage was unbelievable. They destroyed the whole restaurant. They literally they didn't steal the TVs. They took cameras and broke the TVs. They took cameras and broke the point of sale, which is the registers we use, all the computers. They just broke. They ripped the art, spray painted. It was all damaged. Have videos, where people pull their masks down so they could breathe. Got a good picture of them. Well, send all the videos to law enforcement. Send the videos. Don't know if they got arrested. Charges were all dropped. No one was charged. I mean, when we say, our insurance will take care of it, yeah, but we end up paying it later on. There's the pain and suffering. That my family endured to that was horrible. My daughter Samantha owns a restaurant on 18th and on 18th Street, 18th and Racine. I'm sorry, 18th and Racine. Brand new restaurant just opened. She posted a simple post when she saw the videos of my restaurant being destroyed. She said, "God, please help us pray for the police." That post went viral, and they were coming to her restaurant to attack my daughter. I went and stood ground with there's no one to call. I stood ground with in that restaurant because my daughter wouldn't go home. Okay, I called some private security friends that I had. As I was driving, I got you.
Thank you.
As I was driving, the police officers told me, he goes, "Stay inside the restaurant, do what you got to do. Protect yourself."
We're going to take a couple more questions from the audience, but we're running over. But it's a very interesting conversation. Garry, briefly, if you could address the question from the audience about police tactics in the city of Chicago during the last 2 years when there have been riots. What was not done that had been done before? For example, your NATO summit. Tell us briefly what happened.
Yeah, you can't imagine my frustration watching what was happening in Chicago after we had executed what I believe to be the gold standard in crowd control during the NATO summit. During the 7-day NATO summit in Chicago, there was one window broken during the entire event, and we don't even know if it was NATO related, because I'm sure that 1 or 2 windows get broken on a daily basis anyway. But The protesters who came to Chicago were more organized than the police were. They had teams. This is absolutely confirmed. One guy would be a spray painter. One guy would be an agitator who's screaming at the police and keeping their attention. Another guy had a hammer and was breaking windows. You know, Bob Tracy was my right-hand guy in Chicago. He was the chief of crime control strategies. And after I was fired, by the way, that position was eliminated. Good idea. Nobody should be in charge of crime strategies. He's in Wilmington, Delaware. And he was locking up people from Eugene, Oregon. Now, if you're a protester and you live in Eugene, Oregon, wouldn't you go to LA, someplace a little closer? But they were organized enough to get their people out across the country. This was absolutely an organized event. And the police were not allowed to do the plans that we had on the shelf on 35th Street, because naturally we did an after-action report. We did a critique, what we did right, what we did wrong. And those policies and tactics were being directed right from City Hall.
Politics rather than police enforcement. Right. Next question.
And there's a lot of politics versus police enforcement. But does any part of the Safety Act address specific types of crimes that do and do not provide for cash bail bonds? Can you elaborate on what those crimes are?
I'll go for it. Let me just say the Safety Act was actually not the brainchild of legislators. It actually came from judges, attorneys, advocates. Don't give the legislators the credit that we're smart enough to come up with this great legislation, but we listened to lawyers that understood the change that was needed. The Safety Act actually covers every safety measure in Illinois, and it actually puts us in a better situation, and it will guarantee that the judges have the discretion and they will be responsible. Right now, they have multiple choices. And as the attorney said, they can actually let violent people walk free. Leader Durkin, there is no doubt when we have two options for a judge to make that they have to sign their name to, you either keep a violent person in that you clearly know that they're violent, or you let them go home. These judges are going to keep every violent person that's a threat to our communities in jail, so the Safety Act will make Illinois safer. And so it covers all crimes as it relates to public safety. The Safety Act is in effect right now. The thing that we, as Durkin said, is multiple parts that the Safety Act deals with. So the Safety Act parts of it are in effect, and some of it has been held up in court. Yeah, I'm glad you said it. So just so you know, the Supreme Court did not say that the pretrial, the circuit court didn't say that the bond portion of the Safety Act is bad. They just made a good decision to make sure that all counties were on the same level. You don't want to have, because the actual bail law was still valid and not held up in Cook County. So I give the Supreme Court the credit, the courts credit for making sure that we all stayed on par. But when it goes to the Supreme Court, we believe that it will be proven to be a good law.
Thank you.
Yeah, the briefing is going on right now. The Attorney General is submitting the brief, and with likely decision in the spring. And I agree with my esteemed colleague at the end of the table that it is likely to be upheld. Very, very likely.
Sam, a quick follow-up.
So, I mean, I actually met with State Attorney Kim Fox for about an hour, 15 minutes. She has the sole discretion to charge or not to charge. And I also met with Chief Justice Tim Evans. That's probably my longest meeting, 1 hour, 45 minutes. Great politician. but he's been there way too long. Okay, and I'm saying it truly because he will blame the state attorney for not charging, and she will blame him for not holding people accountable. They're pointing at each other. We could come out with legislations, as many as we want. If the people who are in charge of prosecution and the judges are not holding people accountable, no matter what you pass, is going to continue. Because as I said, Melissa Ortega's dad and the 16-year-old kid was released 3 times after an armed carjacking. He doesn't deserve to be in jail. What he should have done, he should have been rescued. The county should have rescued that 16-year-old kid from the violent crime he was living. 2 lives are lost because they're not doing that. The state could pass law, the city, the county, the problem we have here is the prosecution and the judges are not being held accountable, and they continue the vote. He won by 67% of the vote. If people are not coming out to vote, I don't get it.
That brings up an interesting thing. We've talked a lot about term limits one of these days on our state officials. Maybe judicial term limits might be something the state should be looking at also. Quick question here. And this one it says the word gangbangers here, and in this use of the term, it has nothing to do with the color of anybody's skin. It's the people that are participating, and it is every walk of life that does participate in gangs, and it has caused our problems in Chicago and in heading out to the suburbs, which if you have anything on that, Chief McCarthy, we'd like to hear it. But another major issue is that needs to be addressed is parental responsibility. Is it a concern, as Sam has pointed out, teenage gangbangers? Why is this never addressed? I think Sam kind of addressed it a little bit with what he was talking about, what Mexico's doing, and that was a very interesting statement, Sam. But does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, so I agree. The gangbangers are not just people that you see on the streets. We have to remember there are corporate gangbangers too that's greedy and that are actually making our communities less safe and not allowing opportunities for everyone. So remember, there are corporate gangbangers as well that make it more difficult for all of us. So what's bad for black men is bad for white men and white women. We're in it together. The family court system is the worst in Illinois. I did say that Illinois was a great city, a great state, but our laws are not perfect. The family court actually drives fathers away from their families. And that comes not just from the black community, but the white communities. I work with fathers from all walks of life, and we have to do something to make sure that the shared responsibility is equal for men and women. It's unfortunate that women have the responsibility in today's society to bear all of the responsibility for their child. And the way the family court system is, it says that just about, now the attorney at the other end, we might disagree. So Democrats, Republicans, we all disagree on things, but there's this default system in our family courts that most of the time the child will go to the mother, and it lets the father off the hook. That's bad.
Chief, any response to that? Okay. This was kind of brought up before, but in the past several years, public funding for mental health care has been reduced. For example, Tinley Park Mental Health Facility is closed. How can the state legislature for public funding for more mental health? And is mental health part of the solution, really, is what we're talking about today?
So we just have to have the political will to do it. I think behavior and mental health is something that we all agree that we should fund fully. The advantage that we have in America now, we have the Affordable Care Act that will allow people that ordinarily would not have access to health insurance to have it. And when you bring up behavior and mental health, we have NAMI here. I thought I saw a person from NAMI. and they're a great supporter of behavior and mental health. And I take my guidance from NAMI. So you want to stand so that they know who to talk to? So thank you so very much for your work and advocating. Because of them, they were able to secure $9 million annually for our universities to make sure that we provide the mental and behavioral health at our public universities in Illinois. So we really have to make sure that we push behavior and mental health because it makes all of our lives safer. And the final thing about the mental health that I would say, there's a bill that I've been pushing for years to do a checkoff for your taxes. If you want to make sure that you want to donate money to mental and behavioral health services, we want to get that on the tax schedule so that you could check it off and the money could go to mental and behavioral health support services.
Okay, and the last one, the last one, hopefully, Chief, would be we hear the words fentanyl today. We hear gangbangers. We hear all these things. We hear all this stuff in the city of Chicago happening day after day. When the riots and looting were happening, we saw some of that come into the suburbs, all the way down to Downers Grove, et cetera. I think we live in kind of sometimes Mayberry. Is there, what is the reality of what's coming this direction, and what can we be doing about it?
We have to hold our breath, and we have to make sure that where crime happens and where criminals live, there's appropriate police response and prosecution. Now, that sounds pretty simple, right? Well, as you can tell, none of these issues are that simple. Take, for instance, this is one, I've been in this debate I became Deputy Commissioner of Operations in the NYPD on Y2K on January 1st, 2000. And since that time, I've been involved nationally in the gun debate. And it's one of the simplest things on earth that has been obfuscated, I think is the right word, in that the Second Amendment says we have the right to bear arms. I fully agree. The Constitution was written regarding a single shot, smooth bore, muzzle loading flintlock that probably fires 6 out of 10 times that you pull the trigger. Now, they said arms because British would confiscate swords, axes, and everything else. Were they talking about hand grenades? I just want to know. Should we have the right to buy hand grenades over the counter at Walmart? Because guess what? Those are arms. So are laws, rockets, tanks, howitzers. But that's not practical, is it? Has anybody ever seen what an AK-47 does to the human body? The people who are making legislation, have you been on the street and responded to shootings? Have you spoke to the families of the victims? Because everybody thinks murder has one victim. That's not true at all. It's not even close. That's the victim who got probably the least amount of trauma. So why should we have assault weapons in a civilized society when they were created to kill people in combat? Are we in a civilized society right now? I'm not sure. And by the way, I was raised with guns. I was an NRA member when I was a kid. I was on a rifle team, nationally placed. My dad was a Marine Corps drill instructor. He was our range instructor. As soon as I showed any interest in his guns, took us out shooting. 3 years old, I was firing guns. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. Well, actually, it does make sense, but nobody wants to talk about this. And I'm sorry if I'm haranguing, but this is really important. This debate is generated by the gun manufacturers who are filling up the legal and illegal market for firearms in this country and making billions of dollars with a B. And what do? They fund the NRA, who fund politicians, and create narratives around it. There's nobody coming to get your guns. I'm not. I've gotten a lot of guns. I get them off the street. But at the end of the day, this is what's wrong. We can't come to a decision as to how we're going to deal with these issues. And by the way, I find it unconscionable that a law enforcement official, and I know a lot of these sheriffs, and they're really good people, and they think they're doing the right thing. But I'll tell you what, the gangbangers who shoot somebody would love it if somebody were to decide that, you know, I don't want to enforce that law when I shoot somebody. Oh, wait, there are law enforcement people doing that, aren't there? That's why we're in the position we're in. I couldn't imagine not enforcing a law as a law enforcement officer for 41 years. I may not agree with it. I don't agree with burning the flag, but I defend people's right to do it under the Constitution. I don't think we have a choice in law enforcement. Unfortunately, we think we do. That's the place where we are. That's a slippery slope.
Well, we have 5 minutes left, so let's end our discussion with some hope. And Alexa, I'm going to start with you. 30 seconds. I hope for me, hearing you all discuss this, there's common ground. You all want the same thing. You're going at it different avenues. Representative Durkin wants the same thing. You're all in leadership, in vital positions, and impacting the public discourse. So as you go forward, 30 seconds, each and every one of you, hope, and I ask everybody to stay up on stage because the West Suburban would like to get some photographs. And I also want to thank everybody for coming out on this snowy morning. It's terrific to see everybody here, and Jay Berry and the guys here at Plymouth Place, the staff, they've done a wonderful job. So I filibustered enough to give you some time to think about hope.
I appreciate
We'll start with you. We'll go to Sam and the chief, and then Representative LaShawn Ford. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I think you said it. The hope is that we all agree on very significant issues that were raised today. It's no secret, I am a fan of the Safety Act. I think it's going to bring much needed, huge, and really life-changing reforms to this state. I think it's going to posit Illinois as a leader in what pretrial justice and safety can look like. And I think we should all be very proud of that. And I'm really excited to work with people across the board, including prosecutors, including public defenders, including judges and electeds and law enforcement to make sure this goes well, to make sure this goes smoothly, to make sure that all the stakeholders are being supported in this transition. I think we should be really proud of our state. It's the momentous occasion.
And how do people get hold of you?
Well, I'm at the MacArthur Justice Center, and I also teach at Northwestern Law School. I am very much on the internet, and I'm always happy to talk about these issues. They are near and dear to my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you. Still haven't heard why was a 16-year-old released 3 times and took the life of Melissa Ortega. The Safety Act would not save Melissa Ortega because they keep releasing people. We're talking about violent repeat offenders. Not until we see that the Safety Act changes that you have to keep them, and then we should stop. But we could continue fighting the ads for this law, the change to serve the people of the state of Illinois, and talk to your Cook County commissioner. Why do they continue funding the system that has failed the county, failed you, and failed the citizens of the Cook County?
And Mr. Sanchez is 2-year term as head of the Restaurant Association, one of the largest in the world, is going to be coming to a conclusion in February. He's going to take over the legislative public affairs end, and he'll be there in the bodies where all the laws are created.
Not going anywhere. They're here for a fight. Yeah, so I will be taking government affairs, and it's not a paid position, it's a volunteer, and I will do everything I can to continue to advocate for the citizens, so make sure that it's a safer place for us to live and do business, and hope we can bring education to the areas that have been neglected for over 50 years.
Thank you, sir. Chief McCarthy.
I hope that what we're going to see in this country, in this state, and hopefully in the city of Chicago, an end to the polarization of politics. The right is too far right. The left is too far right. No, they're not. The left is too far left and the right is too far right. 95% of us are in between, and we're not being represented. It's really that simple. You know, one of the things that LaShawn and I talk about, we're friends. We ran against each other for mayor. We sat on different sides of the table. We would discuss, we would argue. At the end of the day, we could go sit down, have a meal, have a drink, whatever, hang out. And I was very happy to see him today, and he was very happy to see me. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to agree, disagree, and agree to disagree, but then try and move things forward. So that's something that I hope for. And the other thing is that I hope I stay in Willow Springs for another 10 years.
That is the question that somebody asked me. New Jersey, where you're running show, New York, Chicago, Willow Springs. What's your favorite? What's your favorite?
I can tell you this: my favorite, the New York experience was ridiculous because I got to upper mid-level in the NYPD right at the time when Bill Bratton and Giuliani came into New York and decided to change policing from being reactive to being proactive. And then my last 7 years as deputy commissioner, I got to run that proactive policing. That was unbelievable. I wish I enjoyed myself more, but I was working so hard. That was remarkable. Newark, Cory Booker became a senator based on what we did on crime, right? And then I brought that same diagram to Chicago, and guess what? We set records. 1965 murder rates in my first 2 years that I was in Chicago. I felt like that was my perfect place and time. People said to me, how long is it going to take to institutionalize those changes in the Chicago Police Department? I said, probably another 2 years. This was at my 4-year mark. I only made it to 5. Why? Because of Chicago politics. And at the end of the day, I was saying, the only thing that's going to turn this ship around is if we go back to politics versus performance. Well, guess what happened? So Chicago was an unbelievable experience. Willow Springs fits me just perfect right now because I got a 6-year-old. I'm not a kid anymore. I love the stress, but I could do without it. Let's put it that way.
Great place to live.
It's a great place to be, period.
Representative Ford.
Yeah, you're a great cop. He's a cop's cop. So I always enjoyed working with him. Thank you so very much for having me here. And I want to thank Attorney Alexa Van Brunt for standing up for justice, even in the line of fire. That's our hope, that we have people like her that really, really stand up for justice and getting it right. My hope is that we continue to listen to each other respectfully and really, really be open for negotiations and being a part of the change that we need. There's no doubt we need to make changes in our state and in our country. And that's where we have to start. We have to start knowing that there's a problem, knowing that we have to listen to each other, and knowing that democracy is action. And so I'm hoping that we are respectful to one another and that we listen and be honest brokers. And finally, there is hope because as I was coming in and parking, I almost parked in future residential parking because I'm like, I could park here because I think I might move here. So I probably didn't park there just so you guys know, but there's hope for me with this place.
And I want to take one more minute because we do have the outgoing leader of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives here with us. He had a few words. And would you give us 30 seconds of hope before we finish up?
Wow. Hope. It's 30 seconds. All right, you counting, Steve? Look, Springfield can be a great place. And elections have consequences. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to say that we are a better state when we have all parties who are collaborating. Criminal justice is a perfect area where we can find common ground. And you heard my comments before. But the fact is, there's reasonable minds on both sides of the aisle that can balance the rights of defendants, but also the rights of victims and also police. And that is what I had hoped that we would do more of as we move forward. I retired 2 weeks ago. I am a retired state employee right now, but I do have passion about public safety, and I'll continue to speak my mind because I do believe that there are changes that need to be made in the Safety Act that I raised that I hope people give some thought to, because I think reform, like the legislature, you have to go in with the attitude that everything needs to be reformed. Nothing's perfect. We need to do better in every aspect of our job: criminal justice, finance, budgeting, public health. So I will just say, LaShawn, you and I have worked together. You're a good man. Talk to your speaker and tell him that there's more work to be done, and I will give him my honest thoughts about how this can be the right balance on how we can make this Safety Act truly a good product and one that we can be proud of.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I want to thank our panel today, and a round of applause for. I also want to leave you with something to think about, especially to all our business owners and members here today. You want to help make change in our community. You want to help keep our community a better place to do business. Stay involved in the chamber. Stay involved in your business association. Stay involved in all these non-for-profits that you can help out and work with also. That's what makes our community special. That's what makes everything we do here and helps all these people in uniform do their job, is by you being proactive, participating in a part of the solution. So I think by being here today, by having this panel, it is part of the solution. So thank you so much for being here with us. Please stay up here for a few pictures. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Kathleen and everybody from the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce for putting on a fabulous event today.